What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? Which players need a strong finish to the season and why Eugenio Suarez needs to return to the D-backs in 2025.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist and a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, MillardThomas24downmyportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use code all lowercase LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play $5. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we'll talk about which D-backs players need a strong finish to the season, ranking the toughest teams in the NL wildcard race, and why Eugenio Suarez needs to return to the D-backs in 2025. Thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's get into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And let's talk about which players need strong finishes for the rest of this regular season, because of course we know this D-backs offense has been on fire the last couple months. This D-backs team in general has been playing really good baseball for a while now. I mean, they're the best offense in the sport by far. When you look at runs scored, OBP, OPS, like all the stats you would want, the D-backs are the best. And there's been some incredible players for the D-backs the last couple months, and there's been some incredible players for the D-backs in the month of September. There's also been some guys that have been struggling recently for Arizona. So those are going to be the guys we talk about right now, the guys that need to finish the season strong as we enter the postseason. And some of these guys are dudes that are struggling. The first couple guys I want to talk about are not guys who are struggling, but guys who have just not played a lot recently. Ketel Marte and Christian Walker. Just would love to see them get on a little heater before the month ends. Both of them haven't played a ton, but so far, so good coming back off the injured list. Christian Walker, you look at his numbers, the slugging percentage, 609 slug since he's came off the injured list, couple home runs, 6 RBIs. The strikeout percentage, 32%, way too high right now for Christian, not drawing enough walks. He is providing some pop, but overall, would like to see him get a little bit more consistency. Of course, he hasn't really played a lot over the last month, so there is a little bit of rust to be expected, so that's why we want to see him start to get going as we enter the postseason. Same with Ketel Marte. I mean, he struggled a little bit since coming off the injured list. Hasn't had a ton of at bats yet. Hasn't had a large sample size yet. So the rust is as it is expected. And I think as the season goes on, as we enter the postseason, I think Ketel Marte will be fine. But for the guys that have not been hurt, the guys that have been healthy and are just struggling overall for the D-backs, would love to see those guys start to pick it up as the season winds down. One of those guys that I want to talk about is a guy that carried this D-backs team for a lot of the season, especially with the Walkers and the Martes out. This was a guy that really got going second half of the season. But right now, you look at his WRC plus for the month of September, and it's the lowest of any D-backs player. Jake the Rake McCarthy, one of the best players on this D-backs team this season. He's still having a fantastic year overall. When looking at Jake McCarthy's numbers, still very impressive. A 293 average, a 780 OPS, 21 stolen bases, 8 home runs, and incredibly clutch in high leverage moments, runners in scoring position. Like, Jake McCarthy has been fantastic this season for the D-backs. He's had big moments, late game situations. Like, he's come through so many times for Arizona, and right now in the month of September, he seems to have hit a little bit of a wall after carrying this team for like a 3-week stretch offensively. Jake McCarthy has come back down to earth a little bit, and right now he has a 44 WRC plus in the month of September, lowest on the team. His strikeout rate is still super low. He's just not drawing a ton of walks. He's not getting on base enough. He's not hitting for enough power. Like overall, the offensive numbers have just kind of fallen off for Jake McCarthy this month. And I'm not too worried about him long term or anything like that, but I would like to see him get going a little bit as we enter the playoffs once again. Let's see Jake McCarthy heat up once again. We have seen him bat a little bit more in the 6, 7 hole over the last couple of weeks as he starts to struggle. I think that's fine for him, especially when guys like Eugenio and Pavin Smith are swinging a good bat. I don't mind Jake McCarthy batting a little bit lower in the lineup as he starts to try to figure out himself once again. So we'll love to see Jake McCarthy get going as we enter the postseason. How about little Josh Bell? Someone that's kind of fighting. I say for a playoff roster spot. It seems like he's probably a lock to make it, but would still like to see him get a little bit better. He was really hot those first couple of weeks when he got traded from Miami, but since then has really struggled. Month of September, only a 62 WRC plus. The power hasn't been there. Like his slugging percentage in the month of September is the same as his batting average, 207, which is no bueno. Strikeout percentage at 35%. Like it has been a struggle for Josh Bell recently, and would like to see him at least provide some pop and power. I don't need to see a high average. I don't even need to see a high OBP, but if he can at least drive in some doubles, some home runs, and get some RBI production, that's all we really need from Josh Bell in this offense. Then looking at the pitching, I mean, a lot of the D backs pitchers just overall need to step it up for the rest of the season. Ryan Thompson, 4 earned runs in 2.2 innings pitched in September. That's a 13.5 ERA. Dylan Floro has been bad ever since being acquired from the Nationals. And looking at the advanced stats, we knew it was a possibility because he was someone that was not good in a high leverage moments all season with Washington, despite some really good traditional stats. And then he came over to Arizona, and it's been just that, not good in games that matter. He's given up 5 earned runs in 4.1 innings pitched this month for a 10.38 ERA. A Ginkle, 8.1 ERA in the month of September, 3 earned runs allowed in 3.1 innings pitched. Justin Martinez, same exact stat line for him as a Kevin Ginkle. Both of those guys need to get a little bit better. Erod, 7 earned runs in 8 innings pitched, 2 starts this month. Jordan Montgomery, 7.27 ERA in the month of September. Brendan Pfaadt, 6.1 ERA in the month of September. Like, really, this whole pitching staff needs to be better. Outside of Puck, Zach Gallen, and Joe Mantiply, these guys just aren't pitching well in this D-backs pitching staff, and it is really bad to see because I felt like once the staff got healthy, I thought right after deadline, staff gets healthy, bullpen looks perfect, as good as it can be. I thought this team was going to go on a run. They did go on a run, but it was thanks to their offense. From a pitching standpoint, this D-backs team has not been that good second half of the season from a pitching standpoint, and it is very disappointing to see. Arizona 11th in ERA since the All-Star break. We know their offense is fantastic, but if their pitching does not match up with their offense, this D-backs team will not go as far as we want in the postseason. The reason the D-backs last year went as far as they did is because the bullpen was nails in the playoffs. I don't think they gave up. I would have to go back and look. I know Paul Sewald and Ginkle did not give up an earned run until the World Series, and overall, I think the bullpen might have only given up like 2 or 3 earned runs the whole playoffs until the World Series. Something crazy. Like the D-backs pitching was a huge reason why they made it to the postseason and why they made it to the World Series. And their pitching is going to need to step up and match their offense if they want to get back to the World Series once again. One player on the D-backs whose offense has been absolutely incredible the last couple months is Eugenio Suarez. We'll talk about why he needs to return to Arizona in 2025 in segment number 2. But hey, if you want to bet on the D-backs winning their next series against the Milwaukee Brewers, then the place you need to go, of course, is going to be FanDuel because you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. And all you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel double your winnings for all of Sunday. Pre-game moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting Thursday, 9/12. View your account page now to learn more about your boost. Just visit fanduel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right. Let's get back into the Lockdown Diamondbacks podcast. And let's talk about not Eugenio Suarez. We're going to talk about him in segment number 3. Let's talk about the toughest wild card contenders. Let's rank the guys that we're most scared of the rest of the season that could steal a wild card spot from the D-backs, potentially push them out the postseason, and the teams that would be most scared of to face in the playoffs. And we'll start from the bottom, or excuse me, you know what? Let's actually do it reverse. Let's start from the top. The team that I'm most scared of to face in the playoffs among the wild card teams, number one, it might be a little bit surprising because I don't think they're the most talented team. I would actually rank them third in terms of talent on paper, but for some reason, they have the D-backs number. They've been playing great baseball over the last month. The New York Mets, I think, are the scariest team for the D-backs to face right now in the postseason. Again, on paper, I think they're the least talented team of the Padres, Braves, and Mets. Of those three teams, I think the Mets have the least amount of talent. But right now, that talent is congealing at the perfect time. They're meshing together. And for some reason, the D-backs are just owned by the New York Mets. Over the last few years, the Mets have dominated Arizona in every single head-to-head matchup. And in the postseason, I just don't want to face them. I know from a talent standpoint, the D-backs should be better. The D-backs should defeat the Mets in a playoff setting, but considering the Mets have taken to the D-backs every single year over the last few years, it makes me a little bit nervous. Since the All-Star break, the Mets only have 2 less wins than the D-backs, who, of course, the best team in the sport. But the Mets are right there. They've been extremely good in the second half of the season, playing very good baseball. A guy like Francisco Lindor has really heated up in the second half of the season. They do have some dudes in the lineup that I'm not scared of, but can definitely make some noise with a Brandon Nimmo, with a Pete Alonso, with a Vientos, with a G Martinez, like Starling Marte. Like they just have a bunch of above average dudes in that lineup, 6, 7 guys that I'm like, okay, that's at least above average major league veteran. So I do like that. Same with the rotation. I don't think it's really anybody that I'm like, okay, that's a tier one stud, but Severino, Mania, David Peterson, Quintana, like just above average major leaguers all around this team, bullpen the same way. So the New York Mets, again, not the most talented team on paper, but because every single year the Mets take it to the D-backs and beat them in these head-to-head regular season matchups, I don't want to see them in the postseason. And the Mets are, once again, the most expensive team in the sport. They have the highest payroll. So can we also say, you know what? Maybe this is a little bit expected for New York. Maybe, maybe not, but let me avoid the New York Mets in a postseason setting. Number 2, I would have the San Diego Padres. The Padres NL West team is one of those things where I don't want to face them because they are so familiar to what the D-backs do. The Padres are not going to be surprised with anything that Arizona throws at them. They've seen Zach Gallen a bunch. They've seen Merrill Kelly a bunch. Like these two teams know each other. They share players at times, right? Mark Melancon has been on the D-backs. Sergio Alcantara has been on both the D-backs and the Padres. All the Padres need to do is get Jock Peterson next, and then he would have played for every team in the NL West. I just think these two teams are so familiar with each other, and it's one of those things where I think you just throw out the stats, throw out the numbers, throw out everything. These two teams are familiar. They play each other all the time. I wouldn't care what the head-to-head matchups or numbers say. These two teams are opponents that face each other every single season. They know the scouting reports inside and out. And so I just think it would be one of those series where you couldn't even say one team is definitively better than the other. You look at what both these teams have done since the All-Star break. D-backs have the best record in the sport. Padres have the second best record in the sport during that time. The Padres also offensively have been playing some really good baseball, fourth in runs scored in the National League. since the All-Star break as well, with the second best WRC plus. That is a very well-rounded team right now, and I think on paper, same amount, the same level of talent as the D-backs, where you got a couple stars and then a lot of complementary pieces surrounding those stars. Profar is having himself a great year. Jackson Merrill looks like he's going to be running away with the Rookie of the Year award. Still got number one starters like Dylan Cease, got you Darvish still there. If Musgrove can figure it out, he's a quality pitcher. So the Padres, I still think, have a ton of talent. And because they're a team that knows the D backs so well, sees them a ton in the season, I just think that's one of those series we just have to throw away the stats and say those two teams are going to be a dogfight against each other in the same series. And then finally, I have to put the Atlanta Braves last here. I think the Braves potentially have the most talent. On paper, I think you can make the argument that the Braves are the most talented team. I think I'm most scared of their pitchers more than any other team that we're going to face. Chris Sale, Max Fried is a nasty 1-2 punch, and then they could still get a Charlie Morton, who is a veteran in the postseason in Major League Baseball. He can still step up and deliver a big start for the Braves as well. You look at that lineup. Yes, a lot of guys are having down seasons. Outside of Marcell Ozuna, everyone has been a disappointment for the Atlanta Braves. If you actually want to hear something crazy, Ramon Laureano, if you remember who that is, only 29 years of age still, in 53 games, 304 average and 837 OPS for the Atlanta Braves. That's pretty good production. But outside of him and Marcell Ozuna, like the numbers are pretty down across the board for the Braves. But in a postseason series, like I'm still scared of Matt Olson and Ozzy Albies and Austin Riley and Michael Harris. Like I'm still scared of all those guys coming up to the plate with the Marcell Ozuna and knowing you have a World Series champion in Chris Sale and Max Fried and Charlie Morton still at the front of your rotation. I still think the Braves are a team to contend with. Still very scary. I don't want to face them in the postseason at all, but they're currently third in my power ranking. The Mets are just the team that has the D-backs number the most. The Padres are the most familiar with Arizona, and the Braves, I put them number three, but I think they're the most talented team in the mix of those teams I just mentioned. So that is my power ranking for the teams that I would like to see the least in the NL wildcard. Now we'll talk about Eugenio Suarez and why he needs to return to the D-backs in segment number 3. And if you want to play a little daily fantasy sports, then I suggest doing it on Prize Picks, because Prize Picks is America's number one daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stats projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. And don't forget, if you're trying to get fit, why not check out Tonal? Because Tonal is the world's smartest and most effective strength training system that help get you stronger. Powered by AI, Tonal learns with every rep so it can deliver workouts personalized just for you. Tonal learns from your movement and provides suggested weight recommendations for every move with delayed progress reports. They even create personalized programs and workout suggestions or recommendations based on your individual goals. It's like having a personal trainer at home with you, as Tonal will optimize every workout just for you. Unlike traditional gym equipment, Tonal uses adaptive digital weight to advance your training techniques. Right now, Tonal is offering our listeners $200 off your Tonal purchase with promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Tonal.com and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $200 off your purchase. That's Tonal.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $200 off. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Let's talk about Eugenio Suarez and why he needs to come back to the D-backs in 2025, because there are 4 major reasons why the D-backs need to bring him back next season. And the first reason is a very simple reason because he's having himself a good year. Eugenio, I know that first half of the season was a struggle. Literally, if you cut the season in half, the first 80 games for Eugenio Suarez this year, he was batting below 200, a sub 600 OPS. He only had 6 home runs, a near 30% strikeout rate. He was horrendous the first 80 games. But think about how good he had to be over the next 80 games for his stat line to now be currently right now today, Eugenio Suarez, 256 average and an 808 OPS. Insane. 28 home runs, 92 ribbies. This is a guy right now, if the season ended today, highest OPS since 2019, highest batting average since 2019. And he's on pace with the home runs and RBIs to only the second highest total since 2019 and could potentially be his highest total since 2019. This is quite literally a career year for Eugenio Suarez. When you look at the last 5 years, this is his best season, I believe, since 2019. Over his last, well, basically his numbers since June 1st, over his last 77 games, I believe, 328 average, 378 OBP, and a 690 slugging. He has been fantastic. His K rate has dropped to 22.8% during that time as well. And this is a guy who has just been insane, quite literally the best player in the sport since July 1st. Like, that is not hyperbolic at all. That is true. And in the month of September, he has not slowed down at all. He is currently batting. Let me make sure I get the number right. Eugenio Suarez is currently batting 500 in the month of September with 7 home runs, with 1132, slugging a 558 OBP, a 351 WRC plus that leads the National League as well. He is the best player in baseball offensively over the last 2 months. Since the start of July, Suarez has 4 games with at least 4 hits and 4 games with at least 5 RBIs. The only other player to do that was Babe Ruth for the Yankees in 1927. Eugenio Suarez went from a guy that the D-backs thought about cutting, thought about salary dumping, and he transformed literally into Babe Ruth, the greatest baseball player ever by some people's standards. That's how good Eugenio has been. He went from a guy who should not be on a major league roster to the guy who is the face of baseball. It has been a crazy turnaround. So that's reason number one. He's having himself a good season. Reason number two, he's kind of cheap. Eugenio Suarez is not going to be that expensive next season. If the D-backs decide to pick up his club option, that's only $15 million. That puts him near the bottom of the top 10 for third baseman. And right now, Eugenio Suarez is definitely having himself a top 10 season among third basemen. I mean, if you're the best player in your sport for a multi-month period, I think you could say you're probably having one of the better seasons at your position as well. Is going to finish with the 30 home runs, is going to finish with the 100 RBIs and potentially 800 OPS as well. This is one of the best third basemen going right now. And for a $15 million price tag, I think that is an absolute bargain for what Eugenio has provided for the D-backs this season. Offensively, the pop, and his glove as well, because I don't want to overlook the solid defense Suarez has played all season. So I'm definitely picking up that $15 million price tag if I'm the D-backs. Third reason, weak free agent market. There's not a ton of third basemen on the market this year. It's like Gio Urshela and I think Eduardo Escobar is going to be out there. I forgot who the rest of the upcoming third basemen were, but it's not a very good list when I was looking at it. Matt Chapman just got re-signed, and even if he was a free agent, I'm taking Eugenio over Matt Chapman and that insane contract he got. And so because of that, it actually bleeds into my fourth reason. Because the free agent market is going to be weak this offseason, is going to make the trade market even more expensive for third baseman. That's why the D-backs just need to hold on to Eugenio Suarez. It was so smart by them this past offseason to trade for him, and it costed you nothing. The Seattle Mariners basically salary dumped a Eugenio to the D-backs because they got back Carlos Vargas and Sebi Zavala, two guys who probably aren't even long-term major league guys. And the D-backs got back a dude who is putting up all-star level numbers. A fleece of a trade by Mike Hazen. I know it didn't always feel like that. I know at one point it felt like maybe it was the Mariners who were in control over the D-backs, right? At one point, you could say Paul Sewald was struggling and a Eugenio Suarez wasn't doing anything at the same time. And so maybe you felt like the Mariners had fleeced the D-backs in back-to-back trades in a calendar year. You could have potentially made that argument if you thought the Mariners had won both the Paul Sewald and the A. Eugenio Suarez trade. But definitely since then, I mean, Paul Sewald still is an up and down pitcher, but he delivered last year for the D-backs in the postseason for the most part. And now A. Eugenio Suarez, incredible the last couple months of the season. And you look at the Mariners guys, Josh Rojas. Oh, okay. At one point, he looked like he was doing good. I don't know about anymore. Dominic Canzone, I mean, he's hasn't played a ton this season. He hasn't been that good. Sebi Zavala, I mean, he hasn't really done anything. Carlos Vargas, has he even pitched for Mariners this year? Not even sure about that. I don't think he has. So when I look at those two trades, great job by Mike Hazen. Two fleeces by him and A. Eugenio Suarez. Perfect pickup by Hazen in the offseason, and I definitely hope the D-backs pick up his option this upcoming offseason as well. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back next week for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.